go live suddenly. Oh, we're live. Here we go. Hi, everybody. All right. Welcome. Welcome to Artists Envision the Future. My name is Jason Loewith. I'm the artistic director with Only Theater Center. And for those of you outside the DMV, OTC is an award-winning professional regional theater in Maryland. Just over the DC line, we produce a diverse range of plays and musicals year-round on our 3-theater, 14-acre campus. We started our streaming Saturday program last month by gathering local artistic directors to talk about what theater after the crisis would look like. And the response and viewership was so strong, we decided to create it as a 7-week series with a variety of artists and thought leaders to tell us what post-pandemic theater will be. We started last week with a group of our primary storytellers, playwrights, and after today, we'll continue with directors, actors, and stage managers, as well as a variety of the artists we'll be working with in the upcoming season. You can check out the full program on our website, www.onlytheater.org. Today, we've got an hour-long conversation with 2 extraordinary artists. After a few minutes of conversation and future casting, we will open it up to questions. You've got a chat bar on your right. On your screen, you can ask any question at any moment by typing in the chat field. We'll attempt to answer your questions as they go. And now I am proud and pleased to introduce our amazing conversationalist today. Clare Barron began her career as a performer and started the transition to playwriting in the last decade. One of her first plays, You Got Older, nabbed her a prestigious Obie Award, firmly establishing her as one of the country's most adventuresome and impactful playwrights. Dance Nation, which premiered in 2018, won her the coveted Susan Smith Blackburn Award and a Pulitzer nomination. Her work tangles with sexuality, power, and the deep and conflicting emotions and feelings of the body. In The Guardian, Alexis Solosky writes that Barron shows what it is like to live in an ungovernable, usually female body, with ungovernable, usually female emotions. Beauty and cruelty collide, as do desire and pain. Area audiences saw her work at Woolly Mammoth Theater Company when they produced Baby Scream's Miracle in 2017. And Dance Nation makes its DMV debut at Only Theater Center in March 2021. Under the leadership of director and choreographer Paige Hernandez. She was nominated for Ellen Hayes Award for her work directing and choreographing Marco Ramirez's The Royale for us last fall with First Stage. She is a multidisciplinary phenomenon. Yes, I came up with that, Paige. Doing everything in the DMV when it comes to performance. The show that she says started it all was Paige in Full, a B-Girls visual mixtape. This woman blend of poetry, dance, media, and performance magic premiered 10 years ago and has since been seen all over the world, opening doors to Paige as an actress, dancer, choreographer, writer, director, and teacher throughout the country. Please don't tell me there's anything else that we do because I can't bear it.
Me neither.
Her seamless blending of hip-hop rhythm and theatrical storytelling has brought inspiration to audiences around town at the Kennedy Center, Everyman, Rep Stage, Woolly Mammoth, Mosaic, and Theater Alliance, among others. You can check her out at pagehernandez.com, and you will thank yourself for doing so. All right, that's all. Now
that was pretty good, Jason.
That's all I do is I write it. Yeah, that's all I do. But now you guys have to be in charge of the interesting stuff. So how's things going? We were just actually before we went live, and I do want to talk a little bit about it. Before we went live, we were talking about postponements of things. Clare's Three Sisters adaptation, which was going to the New York Theater Workshop, is postponed. They're trying to figure out when to go. Paige is sitting on a couple of amazing choreography pieces with William Havana Hop at Center Stage in Baltimore, and then Choir Boy choreography. How are you guys feeling about, how are you finding a moment to feel artful and creative and inspired? Clare, how are you feeling? Are you able to feel inspired?
I'm not feeling creative or inspired at all right now. I haven't written a word. I mean, I've written a few little things, but for me, this is just like deeply not a creative moment. And I'm sort of for me, I'm more working at being like at peace with that. Weirdly, the thing that's making me feel really good right now, which is never the case, is administrative tasks. Like, I just love when I have like work to do that's like sending emails and like scanning documents and like doing agreements. Like, that is making me feel very good about myself. But I am trying to write a little. For me, a victory is like a day where I wrote 45 minutes. Like that's a day, that's like a success story for me. And I'm also, I have a couple of things that are like, I have deadlines for that are due or overdue. And I'm actually finding myself writing things that I have no business writing, like sort of like secret passion projects or projects that no one's asking me to write, that I'm not being paid to write. I'm kind of finding my way to these projects again and having a little bit of a secret and private relationship to my writing, which I haven't had in a really long time and feels really good. Yeah.
That's exciting. I mean, by the way, a lot of questions I'm going to ask come from the interview you did with Tim Samford on the Playwright's website a couple of years ago, just because that was such a good conversation. And you mentioned a few times there that you tend to write, that you have often written, at least the work that we know of yours is like, oh my God, it's due and draft is due in 2 days. I better write it. Or I took 3 weeks and I had to write it. But so it's interesting that you're now finding a moment to write something that comes from something less urgent. And that's exciting. I wonder why that is.
I think that's true, but I also think there's a distinction in that when I was talking about that in that interview, all my early plays I wrote in a period of like 3 weeks, 3 to 4 weeks, normally because I had a reading coming up and I was like, oh, fuck, like I have to like write a play right now. And I would like write it on the bathroom floor in this like panic frenzy at like 3 a.m. But I think it's important to say that when I was doing that, I was not successful. I embarrassed to call myself a playwright because I started as an actor. So my identity was as an actor, and I wasn't getting paid. So the whole thing was very illicit, if that makes sense. Which helps me. I think an illicit relationship to writing is one that I like when it's sort of like not a super public thing. And so, yes, all of those early deadlines were for, all of those early plays were written on deadline, but they were for like deadlines for a writer's group or something like that, which feels very, very different than like I have notes on a pilot for a network due and that I should have done in January. Like that, I feel like I haven't quite figured out. I feel so lucky and grateful, truly, truly grateful that writing is my job. But I think I haven't quite figured out how to make it my job and have the same sort of like organic connection to it.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
What about you, Paige? It totally makes sense. And I asked the same question. I asked a similar question of Paige because you started where you started disciplinarily has been shifting and morphing as you become more successful, not only as an auteur yourself, but as a director and choreographer of other great work like Dance Station. So how are you navigating going from I'm making my own work to now I'm waiting for other institutions to tell me when I can help them make the work written by somebody else?
Yeah.
Are you going back to your own work, or while you wait?
All of the above. And it's a bit, it's almost maddening. But not because it's overwhelming, but more because I was spinning all the plates before this started, and then all the plates dropped. And some of them broke, and some of them, I could put back together. Some of them I could transfer to digital content. Some of them I had to throw away. Some of them I had to repurpose. I just made this metaphor up on the spot, and I'm already impressed.
Great, it's good.
So that's what it's felt like. It's felt like, and some days I go downstairs into the kitchen and I'm like, oh, there's more plates because I forgot about some engagement or something. And such highs and lows. At one point, I just needed time to kind of mourn the loss of work, the loss of income, the loss of collaboration, the loss of travel. I travel so much, and to stop and stand still was something I had to adjust to. And then when that was over, there was almost this kind of sudden rush for digital content. And it was just really interesting because while I'm familiar with it, it felt like the urgency wasn't mine. The urgency felt more like organizations and institutions wanting to stay connected with audiences, but not necessarily my need to want to reach out to someone immediately during what is very traumatic for all of us. So yeah, and how everyone handles that and how everyone processes how to move forward in a way where, is this really meeting a need, or is this just filling a gap until the next time?
And what's the point of it? I mean,
yeah,
the stuff that you do, the stuff that the three of us do, and everybody in our industry does. I mean, I've said it on numerous times in interviews. Virtual theater is an oxymoron, and so and at least from my point of view, I'm thinking maybe we're recognizing, oh, you know what, it just like throwing it up online. It's not storytelling. It's not the kind of storytelling that, I mean, let's face it, television and film can do much better. Why don't we try to come up with something new and different? Why don't we take the opportunity of this, the opportunity inherent in this crisis, and think about how we can address the things that have not been working so well for our field? Questions of accessibility, of equity, of elitism, of whatever. I don't know. So, I mean, are either of you able to like sort of look into your crystal balls? Are they clearer than mine, even though you've got shattered plates all over the place, that show you how we're going to change going forward in a way that makes our field healthier and better?
I mean, to be honest, I'm quite nervous. I don't want to say what I'm about to say, and I would like this not to be the case. But I worry that it's actually going to get worse, because what I've been hearing is that theater is going to get more expensive. So basically, whenever we go back, one thing I've heard is that like everyone will have to have an understudy. I don't know if that's true. This is just something I've heard, right? So that's double the amount of money to pay for actors. So certain theaters are not going to be able to do that. So like, I guess what I'm worried about is that theater will get even more expensive to make because of the extra precautions that are good. I don't think it's bad. I think we should all be really smart and careful about our health as we're going back, but I'm scared because I'm worried it's going to be more expensive, and then that is in turn going to make it more elitist rather than more democratic. That's like my fear, that I would like to not be.
Yeah. It's interesting because I feel like, Claire, I have days where I think like that, where I'm just like, this is, it's the opposite end of the spectrum, going from some really terrible kind of outcome to, well, maybe this will be more accessible, and maybe there will be digital versions of everything. And maybe, this idea of suggested donations, where some people pay $5, but some people pay $500, just because, where those things can kind of live in this new world. I think, yeah, my thoughts totally run that whole kind of spectrum. There was a great article a few days on HowlRound. I don't know if you all saw it, about rebuilding kind of a better theater industry. But it also looked at like, going more green. Is it that we have all programs digitally so that when you come into the theater, you have to see it on a screen and you're not touching all these things, hoping that some of those things really, when we return, come to the forefront as a necessity. This whole thing is really forcing us to really think about technology and just how we integrate it into theater in general, not just from a design perspective, but just for one with how the society is moving forward, with what expectations are for, again, those kind of green things. You mentioned equity, Jason, accessibility. Also just, it makes me think about, do we need that much rehearsal? Yes, the answer is yes, but I would like more tech to be a part of the rehearsal. I'm just saying it out loud. Mm-hmm. But ways where we can kind of manage our time differently, so that everybody has a healthier process. We're already going to be stressed out about this virus and its ramifications, so it would be great to be at work and also feel like we have control and everything is manageable. So yeah, back and forth between that.
I think that's a great point, Paige. Institutionally, there's the fear that Claire, you're talking about, yes, are we gonna have to buy a fleet of temperature checkers? Am I gonna have a nurse practitioner on my staff when people come in to see your show? But also, like, I've been telling our marketing folks, I want to go to all digital programs. I've been saying this for years, and they're like, our audience won't let that happen. But now our audience is probably going to, it's going to make sense. And it's an opportunity to be greener and smarter and save some money and so on. Institutionally, I think we're all needing to be more nimble. It's the organizations, this is these institutions that have gotten so big and bloated, how do they manage to remain nimble so that if a show gets shut down at some point, that there's a way that we figured out how to offer something? Or we had this crazy conversation with our artistic staff. We've got one of our first shows back is Hedwig and the Angry Inch. I was saying before we began, that we had this great brainstorming session. We're like, what if we do it as an outdoor drive-in rock concert and like put a big platform on top of our dumpster? That's perfect for that show. And is that a way to combat the situation we're in? So, institutionally, I think we're all going to have to be really, really flexible and change on a dime. And I imagine a lot of that's going to be, it's going to be even more challenging, that kind of flexibility for you as freelance artists, because suddenly, what happens, Paige, when the 3 shows of yours that have been canceled all want to get put into the same slot next year in the spring of 2021? Claire, what if you're asked to be in rehearsal for Three Sisters when you've got a pilot due for, I don't know, for somewhere else? I think we're all going to have to be more nimble.
Yeah, flexibility is key, and not the unknown. There's so many things that are unknown. And for somebody who's so controlling like myself, I'm totally like, wait, what? When is it going to happen? But I just
which is why we all got into theater, right? Is to be in control. So before I get into more specifically about Dance Nation, I did want to just ask this question of both of you. Do you think there will be urgency, will there be urgency to tell different kinds of stories? Claire, I would ask you first. Do you think you're going to be wanting to tell different stories?
I don't know. I did have an interesting conversation with an artistic director who is expressing to me that, a lot of theaters, a lot of artistic directors have like programmed the next season already. And he was sort of saying, as an artistic director, like, I don't know if these plays fit in a post-corona world in the same way. When he chose them, it was a different world. It's a terrible problem to have, because I understand him, and yet also he's like made this promise to these artists who are now like counting on this opportunity. So, that's in programming, but I'll be very curious to see. So one of my heroes is a woman named Deb Margolin, who's a playwright and a performer. And she was one of my first teachers when I was an actor, and she was the person who sort of made me believe that I could be a writer. She believes that she's just a very empowering person, and believes that anyone can be a writer. Everyone has something to say, and it's about finding your voice and finding the way you want to say it. And she used to say this thing to us: write today what you need to say if you were to die tomorrow, which can sound morbid and scary, right? But it's actually like such a beautiful thing. Like, why should you ever do anything different? I often feel like, what do you need to say? Like, if you were gonna like take the time to like write a play, what do you need to say before you die? That's really like the only question. Like, what do I need to say before I can't say anything, before I don't have the privilege of saying something? And so that's always been a totem for me that I've used when I write things. And it doesn't mean, like Deb used to say, like, it doesn't have to be profound. It doesn't have to be serious. Like, if you need to get up on stage and like reenact a cat food commercial, then that's like what you need to do. So it's not about like the content. It's about the impulse coming from like your bowels and like needing to do it. And that I always feel like I can kind of not that I know anything, but in a witchy way, I always feel like I can kind of tell when I see a show if it's coming from that bowel place or if it's coming from like, this would make a good idea for a play kind of place. And so what I am hoping for in a post-coronavirus world, where I think it's going to be scary to go to the theater, emotional to go to the theater, it's going to feel intense to gather again. I'm hoping that we will see these stories that are coming from the bowels. I'm not hoping for stories about the coronavirus. I don't care if they're about your mother, your father, your sister, your brother, the sidewalk, the grass. Like, I just hope that they're coming from that. I need to say this because that's what I think theater does better than film or TV. Like that kind of like essential storytelling, I feel like is what the theater is made for.
And that's going to be worth coming out of the house, taking on the risk. If I go to see a story like that, Claire, I'm going to make sure that it's one that I have to see. Like you said, it has to be heard. The urgency's different.
I was thinking about this. I was talking to, of all people, my mom about this, who is like, who I send all the scripts that I'm considering to out. And sorry, I have emailed your script, Claire, to her. She loves it out in Arizona.
I love that.
But I've, because she's my target audience. And something we were talking about was the incredible urgency, and I'm sort of morphing into Dance Nation a little bit, the moment of, when I think I'm sorry, I forget which character right now. I think it's when they share sweat. The sweat of one character gets she smears her sweat on that of another character, and I'm thinking, unlike on film or television, in the post-coronavirus world, when you come to our theater and see that moment, you're going to have not only the usual like whatever responses you got in performance before the coronavirus to that moment, but you're going to get the moment of intimacy. That kind of incredible intimacy is going to be even more powerful and more impactful. So I guess that's a long way of saying that the work and the stories better be that kind of intimacy and that kind of powerful to do exactly what Paige you're saying. Make you want to risk coming out of your house because it's going to be scary. I do want to give Paige you an opportunity to also respond about the kinds of stories. I'm sorry, before I jump all the way into Dance Station. What are the stories, or do you think we're going to be telling different stories? Are you going to want to be telling different stories?
I'm not sure yet.
Claire says.
Yeah, but definitely this idea of we're all looking at stories now with different lenses. I know that when I sink into the couch with my husband to watch whatever we're like totally binging on Netflix, he'll say pre-corona, because it'll be some crowd of people on top of each other or somebody really sloppily making out. And, now we're like, and that's just watching a film or a television show. But I know that audiences will have that same kind of visceral reaction post, corona, when they come to the theater and they see that type of intimacy. What that does to their kind of internal electricity, because it is going to feel like this thing that is dangerous and urgent and forbidden. I just think about, the things I miss about the theater is holding the door for someone as they're coming in or saying hello to the person in the seat next to you. And I already know those things will change. We may not even have seats next to each other. I think, it'll be really interesting to see, especially with programming, play selection, shows that are mindful of that. Do we want to see a show that has that kind of intimacy, actual physical intimacy? Will actors want to perform in those type of shows? Will there be new clauses in their contract? Does intimacy coaching and directing now go into the world of, is this safe for the virus versus, the safety? Yes, that's still involved, but just being very mindful. So I think those are the kind of stories, I think Claire's absolutely right. Things that will make us want to get out of the house and see it because it has to be told right now. And then stories that are mindful that we are still processing and trying to move on and trying to adapt and don't necessarily want to be thrown into something that makes us uncomfortable or could trigger us enough that we want to leave. So it doesn't speak to specific stories, but just kind of the circumstances around it.
Yeah. I love, I think there's been a lot of conversation. Well, we're going to get to Dance Nation because otherwise we're going to just suddenly it's gonna all become institutional about me as being an artistic director, blah, blah, blah. But shout out to Eunice Bay. I can't freaking wait for intimacy with other actors. Eunice, veteran of our stage, and yes, I cannot wait either. Let's move on to some more specifically about Dance Nation. And yes, Claire, I sympathize or I empathize with the artistic director you're talking to about, is this a pre-corona play or a post-corona play, and does it still work? And I feel really strongly that Dance Nation is just as vital and dynamic and important. For those that haven't seen it, I'm going to read a little bit here. Dance Nation is an intense, passionate, hallucinatory dream of a play about a troupe of preteen dancers in Middle America desperately hoping to make it to the Nationals in Tampa Bay and on to glory. The competition brings out a complex explosion of cruelty, manipulation, drama, joy, sexual desire, self-loathing, self-actualization, which is to say, adolescence. The girls and one boy dancing their way to greatness teach each other about their bodies, confront misogynist power structures, grow fangs that drip with blood, and engage in powerful rituals of athleticism, girlhood, and community. And in a genius stroke, and I've written this, so I really believe this, Claire, in a genius stroke, the play calls for the 7 dancers to be played by performers of any age. In fact, this is what you wrote in your script. Think of it as a ghost play. The actors' older bodies are haunting these 13-year-old characters. We are getting to see who they grow up to be. And these 13-year-old characters are haunted by the specters of what they will become. So you can have folks who are 15 years old. You can have folks who are actors, performers that are 75 years old, all playing preteens. Claire, you've seen this play in performance. I haven't. And I don't think, Paige, you've seen it, have you?
I have not.
All right.
In love just from reading it.
So can you talk about how seeing adolescent passions play out on the bodies of older actresses, how does that hit the audience? What does it do to the story? I mean, I don't know that you know how it does, but.
Yeah, I do think it's really personal. I think a lot of people have different experiences, but for me, in some ways, when we were casting, we always were saying that we were looking for people with sort of like the soul of a 13-year-old. Because these girls are young. They're not 18. They're like 13. They're just on the brink of adolescence. And I still think the actor that I worked with that most successfully captured that 13-year-old soul was the senior member of our cast in New York and in Chicago, Ellen Maddow. She's 70, I believe. And there's just something about Ellen, the way she moves, the way she talks, the way she thinks, the way she dances, that is 13. It just is 13. And for me, she captures that age in some mysterious way so much better than a 25-year-old would, which would be I feel like the traditional theater casting would be casting people in their early 20s to play 13. And for me, in my ideal version, and what I invite you, if you come and see the play, is in my ideal version, it becomes quite an emotional way to watch the play, because what I would invite you to be thinking about is your own self at 13, however far away you are from that self, and all the things you've gained, all the ways you've changed, but also all the things you've lost. I feel like when I wrote this play, I was experiencing some grief. I was in my late 20s, and I was realizing that I had a certain strength at 13 that I had lost at 28 for some reason, that I had started to doubt myself more. I had started to be afraid to have opinions. I had started to be afraid to stand up for myself, and lost. I was I used to have this kind of almost feral certainty and a certainty of like, this is who I am. Also, like, it's, 13-year-olds are so insecure. So it's like this weird dichotomy. It's totally a paradox. But I hope that as people are watching it, that sometimes you totally forget it's older actors and you're just in the story. You're just watching these 13-year-old girls. And then sometimes I hope you're like, wow, that is like a 70-year-old woman on stage. And she is so many decades away from this moment in her life. And she still remembers what it's like. And she's still affected by those 13-year-old experiences to this day. And she is still the same person, but also there's so much she's gained and there's so much she's lost. And I hope that audiences wrestle with that gap.
I think you hear so much clearly, so much more clearly, and just as you say it, both the insecurity and that crazy overconfidence that we know of, from when any of us were 13. You hear all of those moments so much more clearly when they're spoken by somebody who's not that age, because we've all watched, we've watched enough TV or seen enough plays with kids who are 13 and they say the things that they say. But when we actually hear them through adult bodies, that's so much more impactful and so much stronger. And I think similarly, so I think I'm right in saying this, Claire. So you grew up in Washington State. It was a fairly conservative Christian part of the state. I don't think that was necessarily your family, but you grew up as a fairly conservative Christian in a way. And so working also the question of repression and sexuality, embrace of sexuality, also was a dichotomy at work, which we see in all of these actors, in all of these characters.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think sexual repression is a huge theme in my work. And I think it is because I did grow up in this conservative Christian community, and I made the commitment to myself to save myself for marriage and save myself for my husband. And that was really important to me. But I am a hugely sexual person. And so, as you can imagine, in adolescence, that started to cause conflict in my life because and dance was, I did dance, and it was this crazy place where like my body just, we would all be naked in the dressing room together and sex was there. It was present with us as we were like learning ballet. And the dance was a huge place, weirdly, where I actually like worked out my sexuality and like worked out my relationship to my body, and both, felt really bad about my body, like ashamed that it couldn't do certain things, that it wasn't flexible in the right way or whatever, and also felt like really good about my body, that it could do these things and could like move this way and all of those things. So yeah.
So I was going to ask Paige about you as you and this play, and you as a 13-year-old, and as a 13-year-old who you were part of the dance competition world. I mean, this is not new to you in some ways. Talk to us about how, and I have to say, as an artistic director, you call somebody, you're like, hey, would you like to direct, I don't know, name a boring play, Arsenic and Old Lace, and they say, sure, I'll direct Arsenic and Old Lace for you. But when I asked Paige if she would direct it, and you were like, it was hard to keep you under control. It was crazy. So talk to us about how you're connected to this, and how when you read it, why it so spoke to you in your particular past history.
Claire already knows this from our prior discussion, but I totally fangirl over Claire and her writing, because this was one of those pieces where I read a ton of scripts a year, but the minute I read this, I laughed, I cried. I know a lot of people say that when they're experiencing theater for the first time, but
only cats.
Out loud.
Only when you see cats.
Right, only when you see cats. But yeah, I was reading it, and out loud, I couldn't stop. I finished the play and went back to read it again from the top, because I was just like, and I'm ready to go back. The same way you would, rewind back to the beginning of an episode, because it's so good. But what I really just enjoyed is just how Claire was able to capture exactly what she's talking about, the dichotomy between these adolescent girls and what they will experience, what they won't experience, how they grow, how they explore. It's done in a way that is so bold and dangerous, and almost feels like I haven't heard this kind of voice before from adolescent girls on stage. That's not TYA. That's not like, you know, cat to the back.
Yeah. Ashley's monologue is not TYA material. Let me tell you that.
No. Yeah, and the vulgarity around it made it so honest, made it so compelling. It just felt really authentic. And then, yeah, you add into the mix my experience in the dance world, all of the emotions that you go through. I picked up some terrible habits, but I picked up those terrible habits in dance the same day I could fully do a split, or my flexibility was the best. Just like Claire was saying, your body is reaching these new limits, but then your mind and how you doubt yourself, your insecurities, all those things, you know, tend to peak at the same time, which is when your body is changing, which is when you're an adolescent. And again, I think that's just what Claire captured beautifully on the page. And then to have that opportunity to bring that to life is just like, oh, it's a thrill and a challenge that I'm so excited for, because I can only imagine from the other productions just how that intersection of being able to see, like you said, the profoundness and all of these different actors of different ages and abilities, being able to talk about similar struggles and similar triumphs, also relationships with parents, being alone, friendships, bullies, you know, and even competition, what that brings out in people, especially in a team of all girls, one boy. Also dance teacher Pat, like the dance teacher, and just, you know, that backstory, what it's like to be a former dancer or to have these expectations of these students that have such incredible potential that you don't want them to fail. And that, you know, the other thing I love so much about it, but the other thing I love is that, you know, it's not taking place in Madison Square Garden or Las Vegas, but yes, it is Tampa Bay. And it is, you know, the scale remains just as huge no matter where you are. The comedy that this brings, again, the emotion, there's so much that I was able to tap into. And, you know, to be able to kind of craft a vision to bring that to life is just really exciting.
I'm so excited you said yes. I'm so excited you're directing it.
I'm so excited you said yes.
I feel really, really lucky.
Yeah, thanks, Claire. And I feel honored, really.
I cannot wait of all the things, and I can't wait for the baby sexy robot dance to see what it is that Paige is going to do with the baby sexy robot dance.
And the face ballet. I'm excited for the face ballet.
The face ballet is sort of great. If those of you that are listening and are like wondering what the hell is this play, you come in March, you'll find out. And by the way, thank you, Susan Rome, for your great comment. This is so scary and feral and beautiful and brilliant. I think that's absolutely true. And certainly what excited me about it. And Ashley's monologue, this incredible monologue in which she embraces her beauty without shame and her ability and her beauty without shame or guilt, ends with her asking, what am I going to do with all this power? I hope I don't pussy out, which is such a great way to end this. And it's a tremendous, tremendous monologue. Where did this monologue come from? Am I right in saying, Claire, that this was sort of written outside the play? It was the first thing that you wrote, and then the play began to come around it?
Yeah, I wrote the first 10 pages of the play for a competition. And they're more like the typical setup of a play, like introducing what's happening, the characters, like banter, like that kind of thing. So that's the first thing I wrote. And then the second thing I wrote was Ashley's monologue. And yeah, it's a 13-year-old girl who starts by saying everything she likes about her body. And then she starts by saying how smart she thinks she is, and start talking about like how good at everything she is. And I think it came out of this place of feeling like almost like the most radical thing I could do on stage was have like a woman boldly, brazenly, with like no shame, say everything she likes about herself with no like qualifications. And also realizing that if I had to do that, like if someone took me and like put me on stage and it was like, be honest, like you have to be honest. You do not be polite. Do not like try to like soften the edges. Do not be humble. Say what you think you're good at. Say what you think you're talented at, and say like how you think you're beautiful. I would fucking die. And I've always felt like I've had to read sections of the play aloud for like various events and stuff. And I'm always like scared to read Ashley's monologue. It's like my least favorite thing to have to read, just because
Interesting.
it just feels intense to get up there and be like this, like to be so bold. But of course, like the monologue, you know, that's how the monologue starts. And then as you go in the monologue, she does have shame and she does have self-loathing, and she has to sort of like push through that. And she has a lot of anger. And I also think that monologue is a big one that really, like, you know, I would fucking love to see a 13-year-old girl do that monologue. I think would be very exciting. But like, it's also very emotional to see a 50-year-old woman do that monologue, because like the 13-year-old is, like the 13-year-old is talking about what's going to happen to her in the future. But when you have like a 50-year-old doing that monologue, you know that that woman has already been out there fighting those battles. Like she's already been out there. And maybe she's lost some of those battles. Like maybe she wasn't successful in the way that she wanted to be when she was 13. And so it becomes a lot more about loss than it would be, I think, in like a younger actor's mouth.
I think for sure. And that's, you know, again, it's one of the great powers of the play, and the smartness of the casting, the idea of its casting. But also how beautifully each of the characters and what happens to them can be seen in so many completely different ways. So speaking of claiming power, I think, you know, the two of you are both incredibly powerful artists, both on your own as artists and also within your field, right? Your stature in the community. But I think, power in Dance Nation is a really problematic conceit, especially for the women who are trying to claim it, for dance teacher Pat, who just has it because he's a guy. But the women all have to struggle with it. Ashley actually berates Amina, right? For, you know, all you have is crowns, like not beauty crowns, dance crowns that symbolize the first place. You have crowns, not friends. Suzu, the second best member of the troupe. Spoiler alert, you won't remember in March. Those of you that are watching, she makes a decision that is not about dance. She makes a decision about, you know, she's given her fucking life since she was 2 years old to this, and it's made her miserable. And Amina, on the other hand, that's what she has. Anyway, all this to sort of get to the question. Are you able to find strength in your own success, or do you find it tinged with something else? Do you find guilt and shame in your success? You know, Claire, when they called you and you were like, "You've got an Obie Award," were you like, "Yeah, I that's me. I deserve it. I'm that smart"? Or did you have like difficulty with it?
Oh yeah, that's like, this is why I wrote the play. I've never enjoyed a moment of success in my life. I'm always just like racked with guilt and shame. For me, you know, it was hard. The play that kind of changed my life, that I wrote that changed my life, was about was this play called You Got Older, that is about my dad's experience with stage 4 cancer, and is one of the most challenging things that my family's ever had to go through. And so when that play then became successful and changed my life, I had so much guilt about, it's not that, I mean, my family supported me. It wasn't like dramatic where they were like, "How dare you write about this?" But like, I just wasn't able to like enjoy, or there was some like chemistry in me that wasn't able to enjoy that play doing well, because it came from such a painful source.
Yeah.
And then the other thing I would say that I just struggle with is that, you know, and I'm curious to know, Paige, your experience in this is like, as a playwright, I'm friends with like so many playwrights, and I'm just very, very aware that lots of talented, brilliant people don't get opportunities. And so for me, I struggle a little bit. I feel like I've been so lucky in my life, and I have been given so many opportunities. It's hard for me to feel not, and I am grateful for those opportunities, but I'm also just like aware that there are many other people who are just as good of writers as me, just as good as artists as me, and they're not getting that support. So it makes it kind of, not to be a downer, but it can kind of make me feel like a little bit, it's a little bit of a sour taste in my mouth.
Sure. Paige is going to respond to that, but I want to make sure everybody who's listening has an opportunity. We've got 15 minutes to go. Please do type any questions you've got for these two amazing artists. And Paige, yeah, success, talking to other directors, choreographers, high school graduates like you've been finding incredibly and well-deserved success. Is it something that you feel you can access? Do you feel women in our culture are not supposed to have that kind of success, or supposed to be humble about it in a way that men are supposed to not? I'm asking.
All of that.
I'm asking
pretty much. I mean, you know, yeah, it's wild because it almost still feels like trailblazing in 2020 when it comes to having a seat at the table, when it comes to being, accepted or given access. Really, my success has just magnified my access or really increased my access. And so for me, it's almost like playing a video game. I'm like, ooh, next level. And I open the door and I go to that next level. But I haven't yet really soaked in that I did really well on the last level, and that I was able to level up. So a lot to learn about living in the moment, and appreciating those things in the moment, because it's fleeting. And something like this pandemic could happen. And then, right? And it's like, oh, I wish I was in that mediocre place I thought I was in before this begun. Because really, I was doing really well. And I didn't take the time to kind of smell the roses, which sounds crazy. But also one of the kind of bittersweet things about success. Because, it gives you the opportunity to be in these amazing places, but never really a chance to stop and really process what's happening. It's also really interesting to see, like you were saying, for me, being multidisciplinary, and kind of moving in between different fields and different crowds and mediums, where that kind of approval lands, where those recognition or acknowledgement might come from. Also just feeling the need to prove myself with every project, no matter what the medium is. So it's almost like this, it's almost like a drug, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
In that, you want to keep tasting it, you want to keep having those highs. But at the end of the day, it's really about the impact you have from your work on others. And having folk be able to say, like after seeing the Royale at Olney last season, what it meant to them and how tremendous it was and where they were able to tap in. Meeting needs is pretty much where my perspective has shifted versus my own, which also doesn't really allow for me, again, to really process what's happening and what I'm doing. I just feel like I have to serve. I feel like this is my kind of opportunity to open a door or to provide that access or champion someone else. So still looking at it like that trailblazing path. And then, it's also interesting with shows like Dance Nation, where I feel like this is my wheelhouse. Like, I feel like, when there's pieces that come along that really show an intersection of what a choreographer can do, who happens to also be the director, who also is a performer, who also was a dancer. It's super special. It's just something, it's rare. And I'm very fortunate in my career to be able to pick projects like this and be able to be asked to do projects like this, where I can very clearly see that my strengths could all collide, and how exciting that is, and challenging and scary as fuck. But, at least I feel like I've got the skills to kind of make this be a success.
I think both Royale and Dance Nation have one of the things that those two plays have in common, and part of the reason that it's really in your wheelhouse is that all of those all of those things, movement, rhythm, dance, language, all combine together to make ritual. There are Dancehall is full of ritualized chanting and rituals amongst the girls. Obviously, Royale similarly. Why do you? And I will say, I'll tip my hand. I think that the ritualized nature of Dancehall is one of the reasons why it remains it's such a great post-pandemic play, because we're all going to be reaching for ritual and reaching for that kind of shamanism almost of the theater. But why do you think ritual is so attractive? Performative ritual is so powerful. Either of you, if you have an idea, who knows? I should have called Richard Schechner in, the guy who wrote Performance and Ritual, but he wasn't available.
I mean, I think it circles back to community. Being able to share that kind of common feeling. I'm going to shout someone out in the comments that I see, which is really cool. But someone basically saying, let's go back to theater in the streets and the squares and being able to have that kind of outspoken expression. That's a part of a ritual. That's a part of a gathering. That's a part of, when I do this thing, you all do this, or you applaud. And I miss that, especially currently. Not being able to really socially interact with anyone feels strange. It's something I long for. And theater creates those rituals on a much bigger scale, but I think people will be so thirsty for it in that way when we return.
Yeah, for sure. Let me read speaking of ritual, one of the great, awesome chants the girls do. And for those of you listening, the show is going to be so much better than what I'm about to do for you. If I could change the world through dance, if I could change the world by dancing with my body, if I could dance away my mom's cancer and my friend Alyssa's depression and the way she won't stop eating Skittles when she's hungry instead of eating proper food, if I could dance away world hunger and all violence against women and all pets without a home and all the sadness and the meanness, if I could dance and nobody would ever want to kill another person again or be racist again or feel alone at night again or abandon their pets without a home again, that's what I would do. That's what I would do. That's what I want to do with my life. Even in my shitty reading just now, I get chills reading that. As this pandemic goes from its first phase into what, as you were saying, Claire, is likely to be a second and sadly longer phase, is this pandemic making you hope that that's what you do with your life even more? Dance all these things into existence? Or are you feeling less optimistic about that possibility? Can theater dance away all those things?
Well, I think that chant you just read, I wrote to remind myself. I think most people who go into the arts, go into dance or theater or art, it is because they want to change the world. It's not success. It's not, I love what you were saying, Paige, about filling a need. And I agree with you that the most meaningful thing in my life is when someone else comes up to me and says, what you wrote meant something to me. That's the only reason I do what I do. And no, I do not think that theater is going to save the world from the coronavirus. But I do think that what we're going through right now is really affecting mental health and really affecting us emotionally. It's affecting us sexually. It's affecting us spiritually. And I do think that theater and the arts are going to be a way to heal and to connect and to process trauma and process isolation and process change. Just the fact that we're not going to come out of this experience all the same. People are going to come out of it having lost quite a lot in a variety of ways. And we are going to need space and time to be together, sit together and process. And I think that, I think that,
What's theater going to provide for us, Paige, in a new way when this is all past us? I mean, we've already spoken some about it. But.
Yeah. I think, again, it'll magnify what we've always loved about it. I think we'll appreciate it in a different way. I think there'll be so much gratitude for collaboration, for our ingenuity, for how innovative theater can always be. And, the people who will be there, on both ends, the artist as well as the audience, will want to be there like never before. Yeah. Which kind of changes everything. It pumps the volume up, the expectation, the pressure. Mm-hmm. But I think we're going to be so hungry to get back out there and express ourselves that it's just going to feel so healing.
Yeah.
Babe! Yes, testify.
Yeah.
I said hello.
They were like, yes, healing.
Well, that is, but seriously, that's actually, even with the horn, a great way to sort of wrap up our conversation. I have to thank you both, Claire and Paige. I cannot wait for this show to happen for us. We'll be back next week, those of you that are watching and listening along, with a conversation, Artists Envision the Future, Actors and Stage Managers, moderated by Peter Marks. There are going to be some great folks. Tracy Oliveira, who is going to be in Dance Nation, is going to be on that conversation, as well as her husband, Evan Casey. Also, we've got Dylan Arredondo. We've got Jade Jones. We've got stage manager Karen Curry. I think that's about everybody. And then going on and on, we've got some fantastic other events coming up. So hope to see you next week. And to both of you, Claire and Paige, thank you so much.
Thank you.
With you, and I cannot wait till we do so in person.
Yes.
This was great. Thank you both. Thank you, Claire and Jason and everybody watching. All the best.
Yeah.
Thank you both. Take care, everybody.